I think a lot of men end up living in silos where they try and figure it out all by themselves. The last thing the man wants is to feel vulnerable, express himself, and then feel criticized or judged from the
Very true.
person whose opinion matters the most. And a lot of women don't recognize that responsibility. Women are much better at letting other women particularly have their emotions because that's what they want.
What do you mean when you say our biggest addiction is our own memory?
The addiction to memory really is the byproduct of the addiction to our identity. You may have heard me say, being right is the poor man's version of self-worth. I would encourage men to get away from being sensitive, instead be responsive. And your response, it might include how what somebody said hurt you. But you don't have to be like, that hurt me, like I'm sensitive. But I can be a man and let a woman know what she just said or what she just did doesn't really work for me.
How on earth can we be a good man? How can we have both sides in us, and what can that look like?
Men do need a safe space to speak into so that they know it's okay to express themselves. And the best place to start is with...
Hey guys, quick one before the episode starts. Two things that you can do to support this show if you're enjoying the show, which I hope. I'm on a mission to make this the most valuable podcast on planet Earth. I'm on a mission. I'm 100% committed to give you the most valuable content possible. In order to do that, I need your help. Two things that you can do: subscribe to the show. It takes around 3.5 seconds. Leave a review for this show on Spotify. Takes also around 3 seconds, and it enables us to follow your wishes, and your wishes, my commands, to be able to interview the people that you want me to interview. I need those two things from you, and I promise you, in exchange, you get high quality, valuable content. And now, without further ado, let's continue the show. All right, Peter, it's an honor to have you here. I sat down yesterday with a couple of my friends. One of them knew your partner, and we were preparing together for the episode, which was quite a unique experience because usually I do it by myself. And the opening question comes from one of my best friends, because while we were preparing, Peter, I ordered food, and I made a mistake. I ordered it to my home address. We have an app here that's called Gojek, where you can order food. And I ordered it to my home address for all of us instead of to the place where we at, just because the location was saved there. And everybody was so cool about it, although we had to wait an extra hour. And then my friend said, "It's so interesting, Axel. With you, I just said like, oh, easy, no problem. Then we just wait a little bit. If this would have been my boyfriend, I would have been on fire. I would have been activated. I would have been triggered. I would have reacted completely different." And then we're like all agreeing that with our partners, we often are faster activated, faster triggered, faster to act out than with strangers or people we know less well. Is that something, Peter, that you see in your life as well, in your work? And if so, why is that the case?
Yeah, beautiful question. And I love these real life examples because I think they're very helpful. Like it's easy to get, especially on a podcast, caught up in concepts or philosophy. So I love that you're starting with a very on the ground practical example. I think it really appeals to a couple of things, but predominantly one of the primal needs of every human being, which is to feel safe. Right. And so even though this is a very benign, borderline mundane, boring experience for everybody, despite how beautiful the food might be, you're just ordering some food. You could probably not order food for 48 hours plus and you're going to be fine, right? It's not a real survival threat. But first of all, I commend your friend that she could be so honest with you all about how she might typically have reacted to her partner. That speaks volumes about her and her ability to be honest. The difference is with you, albeit a friend, there's no real primal connection that is based on security.
Mm.
So when it's our partner, regardless of how benign the event is, it brings into question, particularly for the feminine, more so than the masculine, the degree to which she feels she can trust her partner. So even though logically she would know, even if it was her partner, boyfriend, husband, whatever, that she's not going to starve and it's okay, what it is triggering in her nervous system and her primal instinct is, I'm not sure if I can trust you. And so that's why there tends to be these bigger reactions when it's to do with our romantic partners, is because there's more at stake, even though not literally, but emotionally and figuratively. So
Mm.
that's why, it's just really when we become so entangled emotionally, energetically, biologically with somebody, they represent our first line of defense. And as I said, albeit it goes both ways, the masculine, I think, in this day and age is not given enough credit for the need for safety from the feminine too, just in a different way, meaning more that for men, we can express ourselves vulnerably without feeling that we're going to be nagged or bitched at or have some big reaction. That's why a lot of men shut down. They're not able to express themselves without feeling judged.
Hmm.
So it's a different form of safety. But for the feminine, it's more like, are you someone that's got my back, that I can rely on, who's going to make sure that I am safe in all circumstances? So logically, again, does it make sense? It's just some dude in Bali on a scooter bringing food. But energetically, there's a lot more that seems to be at stake.
Wow. And that's why we, or I don't know if it's everybody, but I for sure can notice that pattern in myself as well with my own partner. And
It's a little bit unfair, but it's also the beautiful part of relationships, right? Is because it's, if you look at the sort of very fundamental ways that we learn to relate, it's a child to a care provider, right? Typically a biological parent, but nowadays, families are all a mishmash. So whoever for the child was that care provider, there's a level of expectation that brings with it dependency. And so, albeit it can be dysfunctional, we create those bonds with our chosen partners that then has more significance. And that's why there's more at stake.
can you? I find that fascinating. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So as a kid, that part of us that reacts, that gets upset, is typically not the adult part of us. It might be the slightly adolescent, but typically it's the kid that is, in lay terms, having a bit of a tantrum. Let's just call it what it is.
Yes.
So when it's some of these, like, the hierarchy of needs, Maslow as a psychologist had these hierarchy of needs,
Mm.
anything to do with our needs, right? So shelter, food and sustenance, to some degree, obviously safety or a feeling of security. When any of these primal needs becomes compromised, then that part of us is going to be activated more easily. Doesn't always have to be the case, but it's not like, you're in a shop buying a new pair of pants or a shirt, and the person brings the wrong color. It's not the end of the day. It could be frustrating, especially if you're on a time constraint. But this is food, right? And so, even though the Western world, particularly, pretty much anywhere in the world, I say that most people are overfed and undernourished, right? So
Sure.
everybody's got, really, the issue is of accumulation. It's not of lack. And that's not to dismiss that there are a lot of people starving in the world. I do know that. But for the most people listening to a podcast, they're not really lacking food, right? But the primal association is still there, which is, this is sustenance. This is something I need. And so when that gets collapse with a care provider, in this case, a significant other, everything just becomes heightened. So these are fundamental patterns of survival that, albeit completely unnecessary, are nonetheless at least understandable. We can have some compassion. But that's
Mm.
also the work, for your friend, for her to see, wow, to be able to share vulnerably with a group. Maybe next time that her partner does something that might seem like a threat response, that's her maturity. It's like, honey, don't worry about it. Let's just take a walk while we wait for them to arrive, or there'll be a different response that reflects her maturity and her growth.
Hmm. I am wondering how because you mentioned this relationship you had with a caregiver, right? How important that is. For example, in my case, and I know we have some similarities in our stories. My mom died shortly after I was born. So whenever I hear relationship experts talking about that part, I am I am wondering a lot because I don't want to say I didn't have a relationship to my mom, but I can't really remember her.
Yeah.
So with my father, it's much easier because I had more time with him. But what is happening if someone like me, or I'm sure there are many other people who didn't have a father or didn't have a mother, and so it's what I know is that I'm even more sensitive because of that. And that safety part that you were talking about is, for example, really important to me to know. When you said someone has your back, that's like, oh my gosh, in my priority list, that's top three for sure. That someone that I know, whether man or woman, that someone has my back. It's like, if someone has my back, I'll do almost anything for them.
Yeah. 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 So again, I think this is a beautiful thing, and I'm sorry to hear about your, story. I appreciate the resonance that we can share because of that. We both went through it, but it's still obviously challenging for any child to go through that. Um, but yeah, wherever there's the absence of one of these primal genders, I know we live in a world now that seems to believe that there's 96 genders, but I'm more a traditionalist. So both play different roles, right? Obviously, in a very stereotypical way, albeit not necessarily limited to these characteristics. The feminine is very much obviously the nurturer. The love that comes from the mother tends to be more unconditional. There tends to be a lot more patience. There is the literal nurturance that's typically associated with food, sustenance, care, and an overall arching feeling of more love and acceptance for the child. The father tends to be more the seemingly conditional love, the tough love, right? And the disciplinarian, the logical, the linear, the analytical, the 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 way that we learn dedication, commitment, service, really a sense of purpose, maybe a sense of worth, where we are somebody who knows how to contribute to society, to earn an honest wage. All of these things tend to come from the masculine, right? As again, these are generalized archetypes. There's a lot of single parents out there who have to embody both. There are a lot of parents out there who kind of switch roles a little bit. It's all fine.
Mm.
But as it relates to, simply ordering food in Bali, um, and how these things can manifest or how you relate to your partners, your sensitivity, um, again, it seems counterintuitive, but the absence of the mother could mean that you never really experienced the sensation, the visceral somatic sense of your needs being met.
Mm.
Right. So I know for myself, not having had a mother, beyond the age of 7, that there was a couple of, we could say convoluting conditioning programs that went on for me, which is at a younger age. My mother was the sick one. So she was the one in the family unit that required the attention.
Mhm.
So much of my conditioning was overly compensatory, right? I tend to over accommodate. I don't want to inconvenience anybody. I don't want to make anybody feel bad or that I've let them down, right? That was part of my conditioning that can still sometimes as a residual show up.
Mm.
But there's also the absence of me having a mother figure that would hold space for me to have all my feelings, have a tantrum, get really sad, feel really disappointed, even get angry, because the mother, and this speaks predominantly to women as a whole, women are much better at letting other women particularly have their emotions because that's what they want. That's the container that the masculine, typically not too well, is learning to be for the feminine. Is, I once heard this beautiful analogy of it's like a harbor, right? And the masculine are the walls of the harbor, and the feminine are the waves inside of it that can crash up against it, but it's always contained. And so, your sensitivity to me sort of speaks to the fact that you were never really given the role model of a space that was safe enough for you to just feel whatever the hell you have to feel. And so
Mm.
you become a little bit more self-conscious or self-aware, which is perhaps why you would be somebody who's intelligent, has his own podcast, asks good questions, because you're less reactive and you're more present and responsive. You're a little bit more vigilant, should we say, because you weren't given kind of the comfort of a bouncy castle to just run around and scream and let all your emotions out because that feminine container wasn't there.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
100,000%. I think, or at least from what I see in the world right now, is a lot of confused men, including me. I'm part of it. I want to know. I wanna have clarity. I want to create clarity together as men. Um,
Yeah.
how to be a good man? Because I think there's this one part that you just addressed where you kind of have to be this wall and hold space, and on the other hand you also, that's something I get reflected a lot from women, especially my friend group, that the sensitivity isn't necessarily something bad, and that they want a man that can share also how they feel, who can be affectionist.
Yeah.
So to Peter, to any man who's listening right now, how on earth can we be a good man? How can we have both sides in us, and what can that look like? Because I don't know how it is for you, or how it was for you. I haven't seen that many great role models in my, like, when I grew up. My father was an alcoholic, so I haven't had so many great role models in terms of, great stable men and great stable relationships, even less. So I'm just trying to get more clarity for us as men. Where should we grow towards to? Like, what would be the ideal case, if there is any?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, and I'm with you in terms of looking at the state of affairs in the world. It's excuse me. It's not very encouraging, and I literally received a text 2 days ago from a girlfriend of mine who is in the dating field, meaning she's out there in the wild, wild west looking for a partner. And her text was along the lines of, please, please, please design a course to help, boys become men.
Hmm.
My evolution into the man that I am today has not always been pretty or easy either. And I've relied on great partners to give me reflections, and sometimes horrible partners to give me reflections of also what I don't want. Fortunately, there's only really been one of those, but nonetheless, a good education. So I think, for men, there's a couple of things that I would invite them to consider. First of all, is a profound amount of self acceptance, right? Meaning to have grace, to the masculine, going back to these archetypes I was speaking about before, the masculine is charged typically with immense amount of pressure. And this is why, as sad as it is to say, the stats as it relates to either suicidal attempts or suicide itself skew very heavily towards the masculine.
Yes.
So I think for all of the male listeners, and also for the women out there who have partners, brothers, husbands, boyfriends, to be aware, men do need a safe space to speak into so that they know it's okay to express themselves. And the best place to start is with profound self acceptance, meaning to know that we're all works in progress. You've probably heard many of my quotes. I say we're masterpieces and works in progress. So that's the first thing is, and you've said that your audience skews a little younger, 25 to 35 or whatever. So those years are very, very fragile, especially for both men and women. We're really, really pretty clueless. I work with many men who are double the age and can still show the immaturity of a very young teen emotionally. So I think to give ourselves a bit of a permission slip, not in any way to disregard or condone poor behavior, but to allow us the knowing that we're working on stuff, right? So that's number one. Number two, as best as you can, find a support group, right? Where you do have some role models. I think we need more of these men's groups, whether it can be, pivoting around different things. It could be around a sport. A lot of guys want to go in the States and play a pickup basketball game, or play soccer. For some guys, it's like they go and they work out or do CrossFit together, or, there could be a particular theme, but a place that men can come together and just be men and talk about their fragilities, their vulnerabilities, their fears, their concerns, their limitations, and collectively hold space for one another. I think there's something vital about that is lacking in society. I think a lot of men end up living in silos where they try and figure it out all by themselves.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's sort of imperative. And then I think the third thing is, the seeming paradox, right? Of like being a man, we've got all these stereotypical images, albeit maybe a little bit more nowadays in Hollywood, old style feature films like the John Waynes, the Wild Wild West, these just tough guys, right? And I think there's an evolution in both genders that we've seen, the typical mum, wife who would stay at home and be seen with the washing machine or hanging out the beautiful clothing on a clothesline on a beautiful summer day. These archetypes have dramatically shifted, and now we have almost the extreme reactions, right? The girl boss, the woman who is commanding more money than her husband, and there's a sense of entitlement, pride, or even arrogance about that. And again, each to their own. I have nothing against either, but I do believe biology is biology for a reason. And I think there's something so beautiful about the traditional nuclear family. So I think for the man not to fall prey to the stereotype of being a tough guy who has to be the proverbial punching bag for the dysfunctional, immature feminine, because a lot of men fall into that role, which I know I have in the past, which is tolerating too much emotional abuse or verbal abuse because we can or because we have the bandwidth. Um, so there's a fine line between being the harbor wall that is the strength, the traditional rock that every woman is relying on, while simultaneously being forthright about the fact that it's important for the man to have a partner who, perhaps in a slightly different way, is his harbor wall.
Hmm.
So for the woman, safety tends to be much more typical. It tends to be much more stereotypical, meaning physical safety. If you're walking down the street, any gentleman would hopefully stand on the traffic side of the sidewalk. When walking literally across the street, he would take the first step, hold her hand. All these sort of gestures of being a gentleman is really about the importance of the feminine to the masculine that inspires the desire to want to protect.
Mhm.
For the role reversal, what I feel nowadays gets missed a lot is there's an inordinate amount of pressure on the masculine to do that without recognizing the inordinate amount of pressure on the masculine to also show that he's not weak. So it tends to be this hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the partner, I think it's imperative whenever you're at that stage. Obviously, if it's the first, second, third, or fourth date, might be a little premature to have these deeper conversations. But if a relationship starts to develop and evolve, then it's ironically, I think, the sign of a truly mature man, a strong man, to be able to tell his partner that I want to feel that I can not necessarily feel safe in your arms as a stereotypical visual that the woman wants, but I want to feel safe in your hearing, in your listening.
Yeah.
So just as a woman is always stereotypically again wanting to feel beautiful, held, seen, and there's a lot more pressure on the feminine in terms of sexuality and appearance, the masculine has got a lot of pressure in terms of performance. And so the last thing the man wants is to feel vulnerable, express himself, and then feel criticized or judged from the
Very true.
person whose opinion matters the most.
Hmm.
And a lot of women don't recognize that responsibility as much as I would say. Again, I have no stats to back this up. This is just intuition that I think a lot of men try to almost dysfunctionally step into. I will hold the space and be strong, that at times can almost enable the woman not needing to hold her responsibility of being strong to let her man in her presence, maybe not in the public eye, but in her presence, show vulnerability and for her to remain his greatest cheerleader. And in fact, if possible, to acknowledge the fact that he's willing to be vulnerable in her presence, because that is actually a reflection of his um, um, recognizing her value. Right?
Hmm.
He's saying you're so important to me, and I value your opinion so much that I know that I can let my guard down with you. And so the worst thing a woman can do in that sense is jeopardize that sanctity of his safety in her listening of him.
Hmm. The worst thing, or maybe even the best thing.
Yeah,
I
if it's time to move on.
I really resonated with one quote that you famously have mentioned many times. Life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free, and especially the people part deeply resonated with me. I'm like, so I started thinking, okay, where in my life am I triggered by people, and where am I not free? And I love to give examples because one thing that I notice on other podcasts, or I think it's a thing in general, is it's very, it almost seems that the people speaking have it all figured out.
Yeah, of course.
Like, it's social media is often a highlight scene. Like, everybody posts their highlights, and I love to post. I love to talk about my insecurities. I love to talk about my guests' problems, insecurities, because we are all. You said it so nicely. Works in progress. Is that how you
Yeah,
call it?
yeah, that's why again,
My
I don't, yeah, I have a lot of things to say that I feel resonate, could almost fall in the bracket of wisdom. A lot of people come up to me, you changed my life, you literally saved my life. They're much more meaningful, not meaningful, but touching conversations. But I'm also like, I'm always happy to say, and I'm still learning. So, just take it all with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, my therapist always says we are all fuck ups, and I love that. It's his disclaimer whenever he starts a retreat or something. He's like, I've been doing this work for literally teaching about this for 40 years plus, and every other day I still discover something. I see myself reacting, and just for everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody is, and so there's nothing wrong with you. What do you mean when you say that life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, and again, it's funny maybe to say coming from me because these quotes are, so to speak, mine, but they come through me. And so why I love them is because I'm also the beneficiary of these downloads, right? So when that hit me, any of these quotes, it's really where I have, for whatever reasons, the way that my mind is oriented and my ability to perceive the patterns and the different behavioral adaptations that humans particularly show. I can see, to answer your question more directly, that whenever anyone's triggered, in triggered is sort of a catch-all, right? For upset, angry, frustrated, pissed off, reactionary in terms of physical, emotional, verbal, whatever. It's really showing where they're not free. It doesn't say, and that's bad. It just shows that you're not free.
Mm.
What I'm pointing to, which really I think a lot of these Eastern philosophies were always trying to reveal, in Buddhism, they say neti neti, which means not this, not that, right? It's a dissolution process. It's the removal of, and again, like Michelangelo as an analogy visually for people, when he was asked, how did you create this beautiful sculpture of David out of a big lump of marble? His response was, I didn't. David was already in there. I just chipped away everything that wasn't David, right? And
Mm.
so to use that as a visual representation of my quote, I think it's a beautiful way to say that life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. Where you're not free is a lump of marble that's still in the way of the powerful sovereign being you are, that doesn't need to be at the effect of life, right? Meaning, so really that's what the quote speaks to, is that what I'm wanting people to discover, and it's very much the raison d'etre of my life, is that I'm here to, as I tell people, install this new operating system for humanity where we live from freedom, we live from love, we live from pure power versus these ego-driven desires, which have always got an agenda, right? I want money because I feel inadequate, or I want people to love me because I feel like I don't belong, or there's always some underlying sort of in order to when it comes to the ego. And that's where we're not free. We're always at the effect of, it's cause and effect, right? The world of causality. If I'm upset, typically the reason is, in my mind, because somebody did something.
Yeah.
That is all that is the realm of victimhood.
Yes.
And so the world is just filled with humans who, through no fault of their own, again, I always have these disclaimers. I say, you can't be held accountable for that which you're oblivious to, right? So even though there might be this repetitive trigger that you're more than aware of, like even you saying how much of what I shared with the masculine and the feminine, and if the feminine doesn't hold space for your vulnerability, oh, wow, that resonates. You could feel the trigger.
Yeah.
You might still be oblivious as to why, so there's compassion in that case. But nonetheless, it shows you where you're not okay with something. It shows where you haven't understood your, without sounding too esoteric or poetic, your divine nature, that no one can hurt you, that you are a sovereign being, that you are free to make whatever choice you want at any point you want. And so where we get basically in a state of any form of reaction, it is our soul being able to see where the identity, the persona, the ego is still the marble in the way of the masterpiece that we're here to reveal.
Hmm. I love that. Caused a lot of thinking, or not thinking, connecting in my head while you were speaking. Were like, I give you an example. So in my life, like this year, it's 20th of December, I attracted a new kind of person into my life. And I mean, not just person, like persona, a romantic partner, but also friends that are maybe a bit more direct with their communication style.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you would meet my friends or people who know me well, they would describe me as someone who is a great communicator, very sensitive. Like when I speak to people, usually very not disrespectful, very respectful, like very conscious about how people feel. And so life presented me this year with people who are a bit more direct.
Yeah.
And it used to trigger me a lot. Like, I'm like, you would never say that or make a comment like this. But it really helped me to heal that part, that sensitivity. And so I became way less sensitive to also criticism, for example.
Yeah. Yep.
When I started my work and someone would comment, I remember the first time 8 years ago when I put out a YouTube video and someone said something negative, it felt like someone is about to kill me.
Yeah.
Now at this stage, because of people and life, someone can say something negative and I'm good with it. Is that what you mean with that quote?
Yes. I mean, in that direct example, what it's showing you is at the beginning with the first YouTube video post and the feeling of like life or, death situation, totally unfree, right? Now, like if there's a gradient, which there is, you've become increasingly free. What you're actually saying is, I'm not only okay with what other people have to say or share about me, my content, but in an ironic way, to see that you're giving them permission to have their own opinion, which was never yours in the first place, right? That's the comical irony of that is like, how dare you say that to me? Like we have some sort of authority about how other people should think or behave. That's the audacity of the ego.
Yeah.
So that is that increasing sense of freedom that you're experiencing. So the way I put it is you're less at the effect of life. In lay terms, you're not a victim anymore, right?
Mm.
And so that is the what I call vertical ascension. It is the evolution of your own degree of freedom where um, I'm not particularly religious, but I like to pull tenets from different religions. And in this case, the one that comes to mind is when Jesus is being nailed to a cross. Right, we could argue that that is something to be at the effect of.
Mm-hmm.
Right, if there's
Very much.
anything to be a victim of, that warrants being pissed off about. And his response is, "Forgive them, Lord; they know not what they do."
Mm.
Now, that is a level of consciousness that is even given a moniker, like a name, which is Christ consciousness, right? I think it's beautiful that people aspire to it. I could say unconsciously, consciously at times, I look to embody that with my love and acceptance of people. Am I at the level where if I was nailed to a cross, I would be able to have the same response? Probably not. I'd probably be saying, ouch, that fucking hurts. What are you doing? you know, um, so I think that's a degree of freedom that is more aspirational than sort of truly something we can actualize. It's great to have as a North Star for us to work towards. I think there's also a disclaimer to go with it where I know for myself, it can lead to overcompensation where women and men do this. I think women maybe a little bit more where they overcompensate for the indiscretions, the undesirable behaviors of a masculine partner, where they will sort of rationalize the behavior or appeal to what they see as their partner's potential and stay in harmful or abusive situations. So it's a fine line, right, between wanting to aspire to being more unconditionally loving while simultaneously not becoming somebody's excuse for their own trauma outlets.
Mm.
So that's where that quote also includes us, right? Meaning one of my other quotes of women I think find particularly powerful is I say, love includes you. So a lot of people think to be loving it's kind of a verb towards others, right? Like, oh, if I was only more loving, maybe my partner would be less aggressive, less abusive, more affectionate, more available. And so a lot of people tend to take it on themselves that I need to be more loving in order to elicit the response and the partnership that I want. And my invitation, sometimes more loving, means not more loving to another person, but more loving of myself,
Mm.
which might mean to recognize the current circumstance I'm in isn't that healthy.
I love that. What that usually means for me is if I'm being more loving to myself in my life, I've noticed that I'm also personally more loving to others. Meaning, if I, for example, take a day for myself where I just like no phone, no social media, no people, like I come back and I'm the most loving version of myself always. But so like before I do that, there is this inner judge inside of me that says like, oh, but what about them and da 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 da. So I think that's a great point that you mentioned, and almost wants me to say thank you to my loved ones, to my partner, for bringing up those triggers
Yeah.
inside of me, because it makes me grow so much. My book, my first ever book, maybe this is happening for you, not to you, is available right now. Behind the scenes, for the last 2 years, I've been working on this project, on this book. I put my heart into it. I put my best lessons that I've learned from facing death into this book. Not just my lessons, also the lessons, the best lessons about life that I've learned from interviewing some of the greatest minds on planet Earth. I wrote this book to serve, to help others. I know this story. I know our videos literally save lives. I give you the tools that you need to transform whatever thought, whatever idea, whatever dream you have, you desire, and take that into reality.
To me it might upset the romantics out there, but to me, that is the predominant purpose of relationships, is so we can grow. It's not to grow old together, or as a lot of memes say, stay young together and have a family and build a nest. That's amazing. I love that. I am, to a certain degree, a hopeless romantic. But ultimately, from the spiritual aspect of who we are, having human experiences, to me, relationships are the necessary conduit through which we get to basically break free of the constraints with which we arrived. And so, however dysfunctional, codependent, avoidant, anxious, abusive, harmful relationships have been, as long as we bring a degree of awareness and learning, they've all been for our benefit.
When do you think it is a healthy amount of exposure, and when do you think it's time to move on? Like, are there any that is a theme that I see in friendship groups, but also in working with clients. Like, oh, should I stay in this relationship? Should I not? On the one side, like it's nice to work on yourself, and on the other, like when do you know it's been enough work, or it's maybe it's even too much work, like too much that like I can't handle that amount of XYZ.
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. It's an unanswerable question. I think it will be an eternal question because at the end of the day, it's a subjective question. And so,
I see.
what one level of tolerance is in one human, let's say on a scale of 0 to 100 is 95. There are women out there, as sad as it is to say, who have not only endured physical and emotional abuse, but physical abuse and remained in a relationship.
Hmm.
So we could say at one level, that is their capacity to be resilient. At another level, it probably speaks to their absence of self-worth or their fear of being alone, whatever their brain's justification is for abuse. And so their threshold, their kind of point of transformation might need extremes in order to make any kind of significant change. Conversely, somebody might have very shallow thresholds where their ability to tolerate somebody's indiscretions or abusive language or even the absence of love is, such that they move on really quickly. So I don't think there's a right answer. I think as long as everybody's aware to what degree their choices are in reaction to something that is confirming a victim mindset, then there's opportunity for growth. Meaning, if somebody leaves a relationship and their justification for leaving is, well, it's because of the way they behave, chances are they won't go anywhere energetically, right? If it's always put on the other person, because that's the same thing on the positive, saying, oh, I'm moving to London because I'm in love with this person.
Mm.
You're putting the emphasis and the power on the other person. Now, of course, people always talk about compromise in relationships. I'm not a big fan of the word. I think there should be co-creation. And so, yes, sometimes somebody's going to move across the world. I know I've had partners kindly do that because maybe I'm the breadwinner, I have a bigger purpose or a career, and maybe at this point they don't, whatever it is. But I think it's important that both partners, male, female, 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 male, male, whatever the combination is, they recognize that a lot of these choices are inextricably connected to their own sense of worth and their own sense of value. And without sounding poetic, we are the only us, meaning we're 1 in 8 billion or whatever it is now. When people even use the expression, I joke, and say, oh, you're 1 in 1 million, implying a compliment.
Bless you.
Thank you. Um, when someone says you're 1 in 1 million, I often joke that's not much of a compliment. There's 8 billion of us. That's basically saying in maths terms, there's another 8,000 of you, right? So, um, really, the point I'm making is when you recognize you are the only you on the planet, then hopefully that at least starts the conversation of self-worth that energetically is a precursor to attract people, partners, professional, romantic, familial, friends who recognize the same in you.
Mm.
And so, if that is one of the primary purposes, as I believe it is, of being human, which is to discover reverence for our own existence, not in a way that is conceited or arrogant, but really that just we honor the life that we are, then it becomes a lot clearer in our relationships what we're willing to tolerate and what we're not willing to tolerate. So, but again, there are so many different layers and it's very convoluted with these subconscious patterns that I speak to what degree that point of enough is enough gets stimulated to make a change. And I'm not the arbiter of that. I can't decide. I can certainly tell my friends when I think, what the hell are you doing with this person? Or to the contrary, I might say, I think you're being a little harsh and a little bit judgmental, and maybe you can just soften and recognize they're doing the best they can. And perhaps there's an opportunity for you to become more accepting of your partner and see how they respond to that. So it's, as I said right at the beginning of your question, I think it's a great question. It's just an unanswerable one, and for now, that's sort of the best I can do.
Mm. What I heard you multiple times saying, and it's a simple thing, yet I think we often forget, clearly I often forget, is to come back to ourselves and take full self-responsibility for what's going on inside of us, instead of projecting it to our onto our partner. Whether that's like, I'm angry because you did XYZ, I'm triggered because you did XYZ. No, I'm triggering myself. I'm triggered because of me, and I I don't know about you guys listening, watching. In my life, it sometimes happens that I don't do that. I am triggered. Yesterday, I was triggered because the door was wide open in my living room, and I could really like notice the pattern in the moment. I was like, wow, this is fascinating. I walk into the room, and I had a blissful evening with my friends. We had a great time. So I'm in a really good mood, driving on my scooter back home. I open the door. The dog is really excited to see me. My partner's really excited to see me. I walk into the living room and I get angry because, or like I get activated, frustrated because the door to the living room was open. And I don't like mosquito. I am not seen because I have this thing with mosquitoes. I really don't like them.
Oh,
And
because it let in mosquitoes. Got it. Yeah, yeah, I got
Exactly.
it.
Yeah. And we had a conversation about that couple times. So in the story in my head was like, I'm not being respected at home.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not being seen. I think that's like something that comes up. It's like a theme in my life with loved ones. But I'm like, wait a second. I just completely changed my mood because of a door.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, that goes back to what we said earlier when you mentioned about your mum dying, soon after you were born. And if, you might go back and listen to this conversation yourself, but where I said the feeling is your needs aren't being met, and especially those to do with the feminine representation of, in that case, it sort of represents your safety, your comfort, right? The feminine, like it's uncomfortable to go to bed. I get it. You got that noise that when you hear that in the middle of the night, it's game over, right? It's like you
Mm.
turn on the lights. I'm going to find this motherfucker. I've got to get rid of, right? I'm just speaking your language for you, but it's like it's like there's the disturbance of what would otherwise be represented by the feminine, the mother that is able to hold quite literally the baby to be comfortable and go to sleep, right?
Mm.
So great example, but also an opportunity for you to see on both sides. One, I love that you could see, oh, I'm triggering myself. But the caution is, and why I said some people can become over accommodating, which is to still see the importance of your communication that wasn't received.
Mm.
Because otherwise, what happens is you become the one that is over accommodating, which would be the tendency given what little I know about you, right? So that goes back to your question. I like to use analogies as best as I can because I think it helps people. But let's look at working out. When you walk into the gym, depending on who you are, if you're a beginner and you're not familiar with resistance training, lifting weights, versus let's say you're a champion bodybuilder or a CrossFit champion, the degree to which you relate and interact with that space is going to be very different. So this speaks to what I was talking about in terms of tolerance. We could say another word is capacity. So somebody who has low tolerance, in this case, using the analogy, they walk into the gym, they're not so familiar with weights, they've never used machines, they
Mm.
don't know what a bench press is, they've seen it, but they certainly don't know how much they could press. If you put even a guy down and you put a barbell and he's on the bench and you load it up with sort of 345-pound plates, on either side, you say, let's go, buddy. Tolerance at that point is going to become injury.
Mm.
He can't handle it, right? So in biohacking and longevity world, people use the word hormesis, which is this sort of threshold of healthy stress, right? Like which influencer isn't at some point jumping into a fucking cold plunge or, whatever, right? Doing this representation of I'm exposing my body to stress as a way to create fundamentally adaptation. So we have the emotional equivalent, right? Some people emotionally are going to be like CrossFit champions where their wife, their husband can scream at them. They could even throw objects across a kitchen and they remain relatively unfazed. Somebody might hear their partner say to them, oh, um, is that really the pair of trousers you're going to wear tonight? And they think that their relationship's over. You know, so again, that's where the capacity. the- Either I'm really hitting a chord here, or you're just
Oh, you did, you did, you did, you did. It reminded me of something. Like at the beginning, with my partner Louise, like she is someone who would say that directly. And I remember at the beginning of the relationship, it would like, oh, you didn't just say that. And now if she says that, I start laughing every single time. I'm like, you know what? Probably she's even right. Uh, it's funny how it changed. That's why I laughed so much.
yeah. No, I get a sense of where you're coming from, and it's beautiful. So that's another way for people to check in with themselves with the grace that I said I want everyone to start with, which is, just know your own thresholds, right? I take care of myself. I like to work out. I went and spoke to a high-end ski performance team about Nordic ski racing yesterday, about mindset. And they very kindly said, if you ever want to come out and, race with us, I'm like, yeah, you're going to drop me in the first 500 yards.
Mhm.
It's like I am aware of my VO2 max and my lung capacity compared to people who compete, especially at altitude, right? So I think it's just, that's a process of maturity, getting to know ourselves, knowing our own thresholds, what does and doesn't work for us, the things we do and don't like, and also discerning the arenas where we're happy to get better, not take things so personally, not be so, as you said, sensitive. I think there's a fine line between you saying you're sensitive, which I think is a beautiful quality, versus saying um, you're responsive, right?
Mm.
So it's a more empowering way to be, right? Because we're sentient beings. And so, meaning you're going to see, smell, hear, taste, touch, whatever. When I hear particularly a man say, I'm sensitive, it's almost like a disclaimer, right? It's like, I'm a sentient being, so I'm aware, but I'm just letting you know emotionally, I don't have such sort of thresholds. And
Mm.
that, going back to your question about like, men and becoming men, I would encourage men to get away from being sensitive, instead be responsive. And your response, it might include how what somebody said hurt you, but you don't have to be like, that hurt me, like I'm sensitive. But I can be a man and let a woman know what she just said or what she just did doesn't really work for me. So that's where we're getting through maturity, to be, it takes a few years, decades to understand what are your thresholds? How much can you bench press, right?
Mm.
And there's the overcompensation, right? Again, not to point out any stereotypes. You've got the guy walking around the gym who can bench press 500 pounds, but he can barely get his arms up to feed himself because of the size of his chest and his biceps. It's so there's an overcompensation, right? So equally, people can do that emotionally, where they stay in abusive relationships because that's what they were modeled when they were kids. Parents that screamed at each other, mothers that sort of tolerated infidelity. And, the woman's like, oh, well, that's just what happens. Guys cheat and he's not a bad guy. And, there's a dysfunctional, maladaptive way that we can become strong too. So that's why I said it's so subjective. It's really to understand, am I honoring what doesn't work for me? If I was speaking to my best friend, and sometimes it helps to externalize, um, would I allow my best friend to stay in the situation I currently find myself?
Mm.
Usually, then the answer is pretty clear.
I love that. I think it's going to be very helpful to a lot of people. What's also going to be very helpful is self responsibility. And I don't know if it fits perfectly the current state of this conversation. However, no, I think it does. I saw this clip of you, Peter, and there was a woman, I forgot her name, but I do remember that she basically shared with you that she lived somewhere in Africa. I think it was Zimbabwe. I'm not 100% sure, but she went through very tough things. I remember that people came to her house, burned things down. She was a victim.
The Women in My Life event in London from Zimbabwe. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, it was Zimbabwe. And you, first of all, I want to acknowledge you as a space holder. The way you communicated it so beautifully, because it's obviously not easy to guide someone towards self responsibility when you hear, you know, something like this. I have a lot of people who are going through cancer or lost someone, so I really felt you, and I was like, wow, beautifully done. It's just like, wow.
Thank you.
The reason why I'm bringing this up, especially in relationships, is I think there are a lot of people listening who had abusive fathers, mothers. Why do you think it's so important to take self responsibility in those moments? That's an obvious question, but how can we differentiate between self responsibility, like this is quote unquote my fault? I think that's what we often think about when we hear the word responsibility. I think that's why it also triggers so many people. Versus, hey, this has happened in the past. Does that make sense?
100%. Yep. Yeah, so two very distinct ways of looking at responsibility. There's, again, what I consider this sort of 1.0 world of responsibility, which, as you said, is typically associated with guilt, fault, shame, right? It's your responsibility. It's kind of a finger pointing declaration, right? And that to me is a very archaic and dysfunctional way of understanding responsibility that nonetheless belongs in the world of causality,
Mm,
right? The world that we live in, three-dimensional, cause and effect. If you were driving a car, you weren't paying attention, you're on your phone, God forbid, and you rear-ended the car in front of you, as it relates to legal matters, insurance claims, you having hit somebody from behind are responsible, right? So the archaic definition of responsibility is nonetheless appropriate, but only in terms of the world of causality, uh, the moralistic conversations, depending on whatever society you're in.
mm,
You know, there are some, as heinous as it is to think, there are some societies where, for example, having sex with a minor is okay. There's no law against it. In other societies, obviously, it's frowned upon, and somebody might get sent to prison. So responsibility also is going to be sort of commensurate with societal rules and regulations. And that's why it becomes sometimes confrontational, confusing, conflicting for people, especially as we all tend to travel. And it's like, wait a minute, this guy completely fucking cut me off in traffic, and somebody parks illegally in front of my house, or there's that
mm,
doesn't work in my neighborhood. So that's one form of responsibility. The responsibility I speak to is not for the faint of heart, but it is the quintessential form of responsibility as far as Peter Crone is concerned, which is the most empowering form of responsibility, which is self ownership.
mm,
That I am a sovereign being here incarnating to have an experience for my own evolution. And as a result, I am attracting, albeit not consciously. That's where people get confused. Like even in that interaction that you very kindly, watched and enjoyed and complimented me on, there were a few people who wrote comments of like, how could you tell this woman that she curated these events?
yeah.
you know, I mean, I did give the disclaimer. I said there's a lot of people who aren't ready. In that very clip, I explain there are many people who aren't willing to have that level of responsibility. I could just feel through my own intuition and my gift, she was, and clearly she was. She even made a joke of it. She said, I wanted to up the ante. I forgot what she said. I wanted a bit more of a challenge this
Yeah.
lifetime,
Yeah.
So that's the form of responsibility I speak to, which is not in any way to dismiss the human form of responsibility. If somebody comes over, hits you, punches you, stabs you, steals from you, breaks into your house, there is the world of accountability that we as a society subscribe to, and that there's compensation or there's some sort of consequences for the criminal. Fine, I got it. But if you wish to really tap into power, then to me, responsibility is an on off switch, meaning you are either 100% responsible for the entirety of your life, backwards and forwards, meaning if you were abused as a child, do not condone that for 1 minute. If I was the uncle of that family, if I was the spouse of the father or the mother hitting the child, I would intervene and take the child and protect them. I do not condone that. But that being, for whatever reason, has curated, again, I'm really, really want people to understand, not consciously. Nobody is going to say, oh, I can't wait to be sexually abused as a child, right? But at some level, the soul, for whatever reasons you declare, is wishing to experience certain frequencies of the human domain. And either, as I said, you are a victim or you're responsible for the things that you attract into your life. And again, big disclaimer from me, not everybody is ready to either believe what I'm saying, accept what I'm saying, agree with what I'm saying, or certainly attempt to embody it.
Mm.
But for those that I've worked with consistently and having done this work for almost 3 decades, to me, when people get it, it opens up an entirely different experience of being human where you no longer live in a state of suffering, where you are a victim of circumstance.
1,000,000%. And it's just one more case study for you, Peter, but I can tell you I've lived for over 1 decade as a victim with this. I remember as a child and teenager repeating this question, like, why me? What did I do in my past life to have this reality? As a kid, like literally as a teenager, I was like, why, like why me? And then thanks to the work, thanks to personal development, thanks to people like you who contribute to this space, I took ownership, and I came across this idea, and I'm like, it hurts, it's uncomfortable, but it makes sense. And I started owning even the parts that were so uncomfortable, like my father being an alcoholic. And as probably a lot of people listening here who had an alcoholic in their household, it's challenging, it's not nice, it's horrible. Like, I suffered so much because of it. You just said whatever your declaration of why this happened is. My declaration was like, okay, I went through those things so that I could become the man that I'm really proud to be. And that feels 1,000,000 times more powerful. And now there is absolute no acceptance for me of any of that behavior. In fact, I do the opposite. Like, I speak about it publicly, alcoholism, abuse, and those kind of things. And I tell you, like, from my own experience, it feels much, much better to own those things than to live as a victim. And
Yeah. Beautifully said, and I'm glad that it resonates with you, and hopefully it does with the majority of your audience, because I can categorically say, both intuitively as I understand, and from millions of people who have followed my work, and the countless messages we get from people who do my mastermind, who, when they choose, like consciously choose to be responsible for their existence, their entire experience of themselves and life shifts into just a new arena. They're no
Mm.
longer at the effect. They're no longer a victim. They're no longer looking for worst case scenarios. They're no longer blaming people. They're no longer shaming people. They're very rarely judging people. It is a switch that is one of the most easy to resist because it's so much more comfortable to blame.
Yeah.
And yet it's one of the most powerful to embody and accept. And
Mm.
again, I fully honor where people are at in that process, but I can confidently say that there will come a time in every being's life, whether it's this incarnation or another one, where they eventually do have to take responsibility. It's sort of the undeniable consequence of being human.
Mm.
Because as a divine being, as a timeless, limitless spirit, you are not a victim here. You're
Yeah.
just not.
Yeah.
And capital A-N-D, there are things in life that humans go through that are abhorrent, disgusting, heinous, that I do not condone for 1 second. And I will have nothing but love and compassion for the people who've been through that. But just like you used your own example beautifully, you don't even know the men, the women who you have spoken to, done keynotes for, workshops for, on alcoholism, who, because of the choice you made to be responsible for what you learned through that experience versus being a victim, that they went home that night and they stepped out of a relationship that was abusive based on alcoholism that might have saved their life because next week, again, all hypothetical, so it's meaningless, the next bout of rage from alcoholism would have led to strangling, right?
Mm.
You don't know the person who was showing up at your workshop or listening to a podcast who was about to drink themselves to oblivion and drive off a cliff.
Mm. Yeah.
So that gives me tingles, right? That's where your
Same.
choice to be responsible has consequences that you can't even understand, but nonetheless, as far as I'm concerned, justify, not that it's needed, but everybody's choice to be responsible for who you are and the impact you have on other people's lives,
Mm.
because that's what the world needs more than somebody who can point a finger and blame somebody else.
That is so, so true. Peter, do I have 5 more minutes of your time?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. I because I wanted to speak about feels like the Peter Crone quote show today. I don't do this often, uh, but one of the biggest addictions any human has is their memory.
Yep.
I once came across this concept. One of the biggest addictions that we have is problems.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean when you say our biggest addiction is our own memory?
It's really sort of an indirect way of pointing to the ultimate addiction, which is ourselves or the idea of ourselves,
Mm.
meaning small s, not big soul self, but really ego, identity, persona self. So that part of us is um, the construct of memories, right? When people say, oh, that's just Dave, you know, the way he acts, he's like, even we today talked about people who are blunt or direct. There's these sort of is statements, right? Like, oh, my mom is just that way. Don't take it personally. So we sort of categorize people, we pigeonhole people in a way that includes the way we do it to ourselves, which we think that who we are is the byproduct of everything we've been through. And I'm not denying that that's part of the equation, but it's not the full picture because it negates the fact that who we really are, as far as I'm concerned, and I spoke to this yesterday when I was talking to the performance school, these Nordic skiers, is, and I do this with all of my athletes, who they really are in the way they perform yes, their skill is a byproduct of their years of discipline, trials and tribulations, and dedication to learning their craft.
Mm.
But who they are in terms of their performing is what they're anticipating. What do they see that they're stepping into? So, as it relates to time, past and future to me are synonymous. As soon as you have one, it's almost as soon as you step in front of the mirror, you see yourself instantaneously. There isn't a lag. You don't step in front of the mirror in the bathroom, you wait 5 seconds and then you show up.
Mm.
And so past and future to me occur the same way. And so the addiction to memory really is the byproduct of the addiction to our identity. And that's where we get to constantly be right about what I say, the constraints with which we arrived. You may have heard me say, being right is the poor man's version of self worth. Very, very everyday example is I knew that was too good to be true.
Mm.
Who hasn't said that about a job, an opportunity, a date, a relationship, whatever, right? That statement has only got any significance or meaning to the identity that is in the what we just declared as the difference between the mindset of responsibility, or in this case, victimhood. I knew that was too good to be true. What it's saying is, at the subtle level, I'm a victim of circumstance. What it's saying at a deeper level is, I'm somebody for whom good things don't happen. Or at an even deeper level, I'm somebody whose needs aren't met. Or at a deeper level, I'm not safe. Do you see? So all of these layers really are the means by which we get to propagate, sustain, and prove our own limitations.
Mm.
And that is the madness of this current operating system that humans are stuck in. We would rather fight for our limitations and be right than recognize our inherent power and be free.
Wow. Mm. I'm gonna let that sink in.
Yeah. And
We
that
should.
is the distinction of my work and why, as I said, I do my mastermind and I have my membership platform Freedom, because those who are ready to break out of the old operating system of limitation, fear, suffering, disease, and scarcity, who've had enough of being right about their limitations, then I invite them to step into the new world, which is based in freedom, love, joy, possibility, vitality, and abundance. An
Mm.
entirely different existence.
Mm. I am. I couldn't recommend it enough to do the work with Peter. If not with Peter, then honestly, I don't want to say. I was about to say with anybody, but that wouldn't be true. What I wanted to say is, as a man, and I think you can agree, doing the work, learning about your coping mechanisms, about who you think you are, and decoding all of that, like, it has completely changed my life. And if I reflect, if I just look back at how I showed up as a human being, as a man 10 years ago compared to now, I'm so incredibly proud. And I think that is the sign, because of people like you, Peter, because of the work. So part of me wants to send everybody to your programs, your membership that you just mentioned, and part of me also just wants to say thank you, Peter. You've been a legend in this space. You've been doing I think you mentioned 3 decades. You've been doing the work longer than I'm alive in this body. This is as amazing, and I just want to say massive respect for your work. Thank you for your time today. And my final question would be, it's a closing ceremony here on this podcast. Peter, I just wrote my first book, and I'm sure I'm gonna write a lot of more books. And I have this one vision, that I want to write a book with the best pieces of advice that I've ever heard or received. in terms of health, wealth, relationships. We spoke about a lot about relationships today. So what would be one truth, one learning, one lesson that you would like to pass on to future generations? If they would find this book, they would hear what would be like. It could be a teaching, it could be an exercise, could be something practical that we can do to improve our relationships. What would that be for you, Peter?
Um, I'll get to that first. I just want to say thank you and acknowledge your very kind words of seeing me and the work that I've done. Means a lot,
I mean it.
Yeah, I
I
got
th-
it. Yeah, I really, it lands. And as much as I am inundated with beautiful DMs, messages, people stopping me all in the most random of places and saying how my work has not only changed, but as I said earlier, sometimes saved their life. It still really lands beautifully. So I just want to at least acknowledge that and receive it. So thank you. It's also been a pleasure to be with you and have this beautiful conversation. And I hope your audience garners some, wisdom and it really benefits their lives because I genuinely care. Um, as it relates to the question and maybe having a line or two in this future book of yours where you've curated all of these sort of closing words of wisdom with people that you look up to. Um, I would say, there's a multitude of things that I could respond, but I think one of the topics that human beings talk about more than anything is love.
sure.
And so I would invite people to understand that love is one of the greatest superpowers that we have as human beings, but not to confuse that with the capacity to tolerate somebody else's harm or abuse, right? That's the dysfunctional form of love. But rather, true love is when we learn to make space for the parts of us that feel unlovable.
I think that will. I think that's like one of those parts. I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but sometimes I listen to podcasts and I listen to one part about 10 times. Like I keep going back to it because it's so deep. I need to think about it 5 or 10 times. Can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah. So, what I would want people to understand about what true love is, it is not the ability to make space for others that can look like martyrdom, right? It could look like you're a Mother Teresa or you're so loving that you're able to tolerate people's BS. What I want people to understand is no, actually, true love is that you learn to make space for the parts of you that feel unlovable.
Wow. What what was that in your life? Like what one example?
Um, I think similar to what you said when you put your first YouTube post up, the idea that as a very caring man, I used to think that my caring was a weakness, that I would go above and beyond, that I would be considerate, thoughtful, sometimes to a fault.
Mm,
And we could psychoanalyze it all day. And that was the little boy that wanted to make sure that his mum, who was dying, got the attention first. And don't worry about me, sort of,
mm,
I'll put my needs second kind of thing. And so the tangible example is that I learned to love that part of me. Like, I don't want to live from that anymore because it becomes dysfunctional or I abandon myself. But it's a part of me that I think is beautiful and I can understand. But I don't need to function from that place in order to try and get people to see what a nice guy I am.
wow. Doesn't happen often, Peter, that I'm sitting in an interview and I'm saying like this is the first time I ever heard this concept or this sentence. So it really made me think. It still does.
Well,
So
I'm um, I'm happy to initiate new perspectives, as you know.
I love that. I love that. Peter, thank you so, so much. Means the world to me that you shared your time with us today, and obviously linking all your social media platforms, your programs in the description down below. Go check it out. I spent a good amount of time yesterday just consuming your content, and I can highly recommend. It's like very good, very good, very good. So thank you, Peter, for your work, and yeah. All right.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you.
If you can't go on a holiday because your entire business would collapse, you don't have a business, you have a job. And what you need is evergreen products. What you need are certain structures. How you can become a business owner, not a business operator. How you can create automated income. You need structure, you need strategy. I know what it's like to be in this pain. I know what it's like to have to work all the freaking time, never being able to go on a holiday. I found a way out of it. I shared it with my clients. We know it's working. It's a proven strategy. You get access to it. Click on that link. It might completely change your life. So take advantage now. Thank you.